Hey friends, it's Thursday morning and I'm getting ready to go to the Heartland Convening Conference of the Global Methodist Church, but I knew I needed to put something out on this particular topic. Within the United Methodist Church, which I've now disaffiliated from, there are a lot of dynamics at play in the midst of disaffiliation season, and some conferences are doing it really well, and some conferences are not doing it well at all, and that has to do with a number of different factors that I try and understand and walk through. If this is your first time watching me, plain spoken is an effort on the part of me. I'm Jeffrey Rickman. I'm a Global Methodist clergy, was United Methodist, disaffiliated earlier this year. My frustration was that a lot of conservative leadership just wasn't able to engage in this medium in a helpful way. There's a lot of good stuff in print, but a lot of people in local churches don't know how to navigate all of that and make their way through and come to conclusions. It's helpful just to have some basic analysis from someone who's trying to just put out good information. So that's me. That's kind of what I'm trying to do. I'm conservative, and that's my worldview, and I try to explain how situations look from a conservative worldview, not just for other conservative people, but also so that liberals will understand, okay, why do they continue saying and doing these things when we are so obviously the good ones? Why do they want to be bad? Well, we don't want to be bad. We have a different way of discerning these things, and so I want to be helpful for achieving understanding. So if you think I'm helpful, promote this stuff. If you don't, just move along. But I wanted to talk about Wesley Memorial Church being withheld potentially from disaffiliating from the United Methodist Church in Western North Carolina annual conference. They are going to be having a special called conference this Saturday, November 4th. And you should see on my screen here, this is the invitation that was issued on March 21st, 2023 for the conference. And there's going to be a special executive session of clergy members at 9 a.m. And then they're going to have a special session at 10 a.m. And they're both going to be held virtually. So I'm not going to be able to watch. I'm going to be over at the Heartland Convening Conference, so everybody can watch as you want. And I do think it's important for people to watch these things because what's undergirding a lot of reporting that I do is I'm of the mind that there are a lot of institutional pressures that are causing the United Methodist Church to behave in ways that are not good, and that the only way that you can help the people in charge behave well is to let them know you're watching them so that they're not thinking that they're getting away with things behind closed doors. And I know that makes certain insinuations about the character of people in charge. And I just think that concern is historically substantiated. I think we've seen a number of instances in which conference leadership in some conferences has behaved very immorally in order to hold on to stuff, whether it be status stuff, wealth stuff. So immediately on the top of my mind is Arkansas Annual Conference, which withheld 3 churches last year, and I did some good reporting on that. The concern that I and several others have is that Western North Carolina is targeting one church in particular for withholding. So just one cool thing to show you about this special annual conference. They released the names of every single one of their churches and whether or not they plan to disaffiliate. So let's see, we have our statistical tables here. They have 800 some churches at this point. You'll see that they're one of the bigger annual conferences, so I've got them highlighted down here. They have a bigger total number of churches, total attendance, total membership, higher than most. And the reason there are blanks there is because I was not confident in the information Data had on some of those years. They're a larger conference, and they've already lost 20% of their churches. So I haven't been able to work out their attendance. Man, it would take a nerd going through and just figuring out the average attendance of each church. But they're looking at releasing, according to this website that I just showed you, they're looking at releasing another 113 churches, which if they allow all of them to disaffiliate would mean that they've lost almost a third of their conference. So they're not trying to fight all of them. They're just trying to fight, from what I can tell, one of them. And the reason I say that, I'm going to go ahead and pull up this video there's an email that we're going to look at, and then there's this video. And so this was a sit down with Mark Holland, who is, of course, the primary voice of what is it? Mainstream United Methodist Mainline. I forget what it's called, but they've been regularly putting out. He's been regularly putting out public short articles that are incendiary and a lot of dishonesty involved in them. So he's the one going to be sitting on the left here, and then Reverend Howell is on the right. He is in this annual conference, and the two of them had a sit down where a number of mischaracterizations were made about the history leading up to this point. But here's the particular point that I wanted to highlight in their talk, and they're talking about Wesley Memorial Church.
It's just such a sad thing, and we've had one church in our conference recently, a pretty large church, Wesley Memorial Church in High Point. They recently had a vote and narrowly voted to disaffiliate. Well, now the vote is being contended because they're saying, well, they brought in a bunch of ringers at the last minute to give them just enough. It's like, oh my. Like God up in heaven isn't saying, I am so pleased with my children on earth doing these things. It's absolutely devastating. I don't pretend to have heard from everybody at Myers Park United Methodist Church, because some of you probably don't tell me things that you'd like to tell me, but I hope you will always. I can report this because I kept count. We have 5,000 something members. I have had the number of people who've asked me, are we going to vote, is 3.
So obviously his church leans left and is not sympathetic with the cause of disaffiliating. But right there, he just talks about another church's business like he's some kind of insider, and he lifts up this allegation that they brought in ringers to have this vote. So, of course, like the voting at local churches to disaffiliate has been a highly contested issue because in order to disaffiliate, you have to have a supermajority, 66.6% plus 1. And so whenever the margin around that is anywhere close, they contest it. So the problem here is, long story short, even with these supposed 66 ringers, they clear the vote. So it's much ado about nothing, and all cards on the table. I think that they just have, what you saw with Jonesboro First in Arkansas, I think you're seeing here. I think you see a bunch of people in this church that are BUMC, stay UMC types that are just willing to be nasty about it, make a big fuss about it, and even lie about it. So I think that's what happened here. I think that there are people in Wesley Memorial Church who have been dishonestly representing what's been going on here so that people on the outside who listen to them and don't investigate are inclined to believe them. So if you don't have the energy for going through all of the particulars and the analysis that I offer here, what I'm hoping is that people in Western North Carolina watch this, that delegates in particular watch this and consider, okay, why is it that they're saying this on this side and they say this on the other side? What explains this? A lot of people just throw their hands up and go, well, this is where I lean, so I'm just going to believe people who are on my side. And that's really not a way to do things because people on both sides lie. And so you need to make choices with respect to the truth, not with respect to, whatever your side is saying. So, with respect to this church, why is it that so many people from this church seem to be unhappy and willing to complain about it? Some churches are more willing to complain and make a big fuss and rope other people in than others. It just has to do with the particular personalities there. It has to do with the dynamics on the ground. It has to do with conference intervention and action. So I've talked to somebody at Wesley Memorial who they didn't want me to share all the particular details, but there has indeed been a ton of conference involvement there to the point that they actually stopped the disaffiliation process at one point and then restarted it to the point where they insisted on being in charge of who was on this primary committee responsible for putting out information about disaffiliation. And at first it was evenly balanced between those who wanted to stay and those who wanted to go. But after they looked at all of the information, votes switched so that more people wanted to disaffiliate than before they started looking into this. So this is one of the things that we've found, not just at this church, but across the connection, is that whenever churches start asking these questions, they start coming to the conclusion a lot of the time that the United Methodist Church is not a body that they want to belong to for several different reasons. So at this point, I want to just back off for a second and remind you, I've already covered a lot of the topics involved here, and I want to remind you in particular of a video that I did. I'm going to try and edit this and put it out before I leave town today. But there was a video that I did, The Specter of Conferences Blocking Disaffiliations, and that was with respect to my old conference, Oklahoma Annual Conference. And I covered an article by John Lamperis called "What Did Stay UMC Activists Really Win by Blocking Disaffiliation?" So in Western North Carolina, I think the delegates would be wise to consult that piece that I did, because I walked through that analysis by John Lamperis where he shows definitively that conferences that stopped disaffiliations have not done well. This has not been good for anybody. Western North Carolina, as they're looking at doing this, need to consider the very realistic likelihood that this will actually harm their conference if they stop the vote. So that's why I suspect Drew McIntyre mispost on Twitter. He said, and this is clergy from Western North Carolina, some leaders in our conference clearly want to throw millions of dollars down the tube in a lawsuit which would inevitably result from blocking the disaffiliation of a large and wealthy church and thus imitate the Jonesboro First debacle. This is a petty and vindictive course. So Jonesboro First, of course, is the Arkansas church that I referenced a little while ago. So the church that we're looking at is Wesley Memorial United Methodist Church that's in High Point, North Carolina. Their head pastor is Jeffrey Scott Patterson. I don't know anything about him. They're not the biggest church. They're not even close to the biggest church in Western North Carolina. Their professing members are just over 2,000. Their weekly attendance is just 350. Now, I looked at their stats in their conference journal, and they're reporting like over 2,000 people worshiping online weekly for 2022. And that was at the 2022 journal. So for 2021, that's what they were reporting. So I don't know how much that holds up. Maybe they're a lot bigger than they seem on data. But then there's a huge church, Christ Church in Hickory, is getting average attendance of almost 2,700 a week. It way overshadows all the others. If they were leaving, I could understand everybody freaking out and trying to make something up. This one, I mean, yeah, it's bigger than most, but it seems kind of like small potatoes compared to not just Christ, but there's several other churches in their conference that are bigger. It's a big conference. But that being said, Wesley Memorial, let's see, their most recent stats on how much they were apportioned was $146,000, more than $146,000, and they paid 100% of their apportionments. So it seems to me they've been acting in good faith. They kind of put forth the image like they've been growing. This is their attendance figures according to data. They've generally been going down. So they were coming back up, and then they went down with COVID, ostensibly. And then according to people there, they've been going back up, and that's largely because there are a lot of smaller United Methodist churches in that area where the leadership hasn't even let them discuss disaffiliation. So they've wanted to be with a church that's more sympathetic to that, which makes sense. So we should look at the letter which got sent out against the church. So here it is. There was an email that was sent out to delegates of the annual conference. I wasn't told who sent it out. This is just the text of the email. I think the person who sent it to me was not wanting to stir things up or be dramatic. They were just wanting to give me the basic information. So here's the allegation. Then we're going to look at the answer from the church, and then we might look at a couple other things. So here's the letter. Dear colleagues and members of the conference, on November 4th, there will be a special called session where each of us is called to vote for or against the churches requesting disaffiliation. The vote will ask us for a yes or no vote on each church. The purpose of this letter is to give delegates information to make an informed vote. In the case of at least one of the churches before us, Wesley Memorial and High Point, there are questions about their process, while other churches may have actively recruited members to vote for disaffiliation or employed questionable practices. Wesley Memorial is an example of a church where that can be documented with numbers, which show that irregularity was a decisive factor in their vote to disaffiliate. So this is already what this wants to do is not promote accurate information. It's giving information, it's not accurate information. And what it wants to do is create a stink around this one particular church so that delegates are going, I don't know. Now, this is a conference that leans left. And the reason I say that is partly because of their bishops. So this is their bishop, Bishop Kenneth H. Carter. You might remember him. He was previously at the Florida annual conference where he went head-to-head with a number of churches that wanted to leave. They had very disingenuous disaffiliation terms, which required them going to court to figure it out. Of course, the annual conference prevailed in court. Doesn't mean that they're right in actuality. It just means that the state sided with them. So Carter has a long track record of being pretty far left. If you look at his own self-description, you'll see collaborations with, what's her name? Diana Butler Bass, very far left. I would consider her a propagandist. There are a number of publications he's made, and then people he's collaborated with where he's made it very clear where he sympathizes. Now, he hasn't been there long, but North Carolina is known to be a place that is friendly to far left progressives. And one of the reasons I say that is because nothing ever came of this, which got my attention in September of last year. Well, I heard about it a month or two afterwards, but this is at a church, Wingate United Methodist Church in Western North Carolina, which hosted a children's drag hour and crafts party. And so there was some back and forth about, okay, are they hosting or it is an outside group hosting it? Distinction without a difference. They were allowing it to happen on their facility with their people. And of course, the concern being not just normalization of sexual behavior that Christians would consider immoral, but actually grooming children to be more comfortable engaging in sexual activity, talk. It's grooming is what it's called. And so I've got a number of screenshots of the pastor engaging in back and forth with the community that rightly took offense. This is that pastor right here, Christopher Harbin. He's a provisional elder. I mean, this is the kind of crap that that he posts. He puts that on his wall. You go down and you see pictures of, oh, rainbows, 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 COVID. We have all this far left virtue signaling. And all that to say, like, this is just one example of somebody who I would consider very extreme. I could not be in fellowship with this person or this church, and yet they exist very comfortably in that annual conference, whereas a church that's paying its apportionments, goes faithfully through this process, dots all their I's and crosses all their T's, is still held up because they don't toe the new orthodoxy. And the conference has the ability to hold them up, and so they will. You know, this is what you find in lots of annual conferences. There's not a talk around what is morally okay and what's not. It's just, what do we have the right to do? So that's what happened in Oklahoma, where I was at. Whenever things went to the court, it was not, here's why we're right to treat these churches in this way. It's, here's what we have the right to do. In state, you have no right to step in and tell us what to do. So that's, Western North Carolina is not a place that is friendly to right-leaning believers, and that's why they're leaving. That's why they're looking at losing a third of their people. All right, so let's get back into this letter. On April 30th, the Wesley Memorial congregation took a straw vote to measure the feelings of the congregation. This, by the way, was when they had their disaffiliation process stopped by the conference. The motion to disaffiliate failed to reach the required 67% threshold. What percent did they get? 65. From April 30th until the formal vote on August 27th, scores of new members joined Wesley Memorial, 66 new members in the 6 weeks before the vote. With the influx of new members, the official vote on August 27th was a reversal of the congregation's straw vote on April 30th. The reversal of this long-standing United Methodist congregation came in the number of new members, people who had been part of the Wesley Memorial less than 4 months. Some of them were members only days before the vote. Now, how would they know that? Only by people who were there, disgruntled people who, this is how churches are. Somebody starts a rumor and then they just regurgitate it. I'm certain that that's what's happened here. And because it fits a certain narrative, it gets promoted. Doesn't mean it's true. It just means it suits a certain narrative. Because these concerns have been brought to us by multiple reliable people with direct knowledge, these allegations appear to us to be to be credible. So unless there's names, here's just a general rule. Unless there's names attached for public consumption, you cannot trust anything. Just because there's names at the bottom of this letter does not mean that those are the names of the people who have firsthand knowledge. That means we have decided to trust these other people that are unnamed. So until, and just because there is a name, that doesn't necessarily mean it's true either, but it should always make you very skeptical whenever there are anonymous people that they're then saying, I've chosen to trust this. So that's why, I'm keeping one person anonymous, but they've sent me these documents. And so the documents are what make me pretty clear that something is wrong here, but just because one person contacts me and says, hey, here's what's actually going on, does not mean that that's the gospel truth. You have to investigate these things. And it seems to me that Howell and the mainstream United Methodist mainline, whatever, the BUMC, Stay UMC, it doesn't seem to me that they did any research on this. It's just, here's the rumor that we're going to get started and create a stink around this church so that whenever we vote on Saturday, we'll at least hold on to this one. And it'll be not just a Pyrrhic victory if that happens. According to Lon Paris, which I'm sympathetic with, but I mean his analysis I'm sympathetic with, it's going to hurt the conference if they hold on to this church. If Drew McIntyre's talk about this church, if he is talking about this church, is that they're rich and have the resources to fight the conference, then this could really drag a lot of people down. All right, let's finish this letter. Because these concerns have been brought to us by multiple reliable people, they said, we will vote no to the disaffiliation of this church and ask you to consider doing the same. If you know of questionable practices that can be documented at and I appreciate that can be documented at other disaffiliating churches before the conference, we urge you to vote no on them as well. We are sending this to clergy contacts and ask you to share these concerns with the lay delegates of your church. Okay, so they just sent that out to all clergy. It is within both the authority and responsibility of the annual conference to vote no when warranted. Our vote is both a privilege and a responsibility of our connection. The appeal, and this is true, and we don't need to look at the rest, it's just names. But if something really wonky and immoral happened, then you should vote no. But the thing is, if it's just unsubstantiated rumors and allegations, no, that's not sufficient. And you got to remember, at least at bigger churches, the conference is very hands-on. They oversee every step of the process. They're not going to let something super immoral happen. Or if they are, you can ask them whenever they come. But the notion that that this just the conference was asleep at the wheel and all this immoral stuff happened, that's somewhat ridiculous. Now, a lot of this just comes down to simple math. Do 66 votes swing anything? And the simple answer is no. But, pastors are not necessarily mathematicians. But here's the thing, mathematicians do complex math. Addition, subtraction, clergy should be able to do these things. And so let's look at this answer from the church. They drafted a letter, it's not inflammatory or incendiary. It's just, here's the truth. And it does some of that basic math for us so that even if the allegation were true and they brought in all of these ringers, what difference would it make? Here's the letter. So it's called A Message from Leadership and Clergy of that church, Wesley Memorial. We have been made aware that you received an email from a small group of clergy delegates opposed to Wesley Memorial's request for disaffiliation, asking you to vote no. Those opposed to disaffiliation, who are neither members nor clergy of our church and took no role and sought no information from us regarding our vote, argue that 66 new members joined the church in the months prior to its official vote, thus swinging the vote to yes. That allegation is factually and mathematically not true. And you'll see that there's a little footnote there. The same false allegation was made by opponents of the disaffiliation of FUMC Jonesboro, Arkansas, which is currently engaged in litigation with the Arkansas Annual Conference. That note, I think, functions just kind of as a shot across the bow saying, hey, if you want a lawsuit, keep going down this road. They don't say it flat out like that, but that's a clear connection to draw. Please consider the following facts and reach out to us if you have any questions regarding this matter. It looks like there are 3 facts. 1, over the last 4 years, Wesley Memorial has experienced unprecedented growth, both numerically and spiritually. The reason I'm pausing there is because whenever I looked at their stats, there seemed to be maybe some growth, but just because data, this is the thing that I worry and wonder about sometimes, is that with all the information that gets collected and put together by GCFA, that things don't reflect what's going on the ground. So this is obviously either the leadership here is exaggerating, or this is actually what's going on. It's just not been reflected in paper. It kind of bothers me that they'd say we're growing spiritually. Anybody's going to say that, but whatever. 66 people joined our church during the period of late June, mid-August. Considering that Wesley Memorial has added 283 new church members in the past 4 years, they're not lying about that. This is not an outlier and well within our current growth trajectory. So even if the trajectory all of a sudden is taking a step up, if they are a growing church, if they're a vital church, if there are other churches around them that are not talking about disaffiliation, and there are people who are interested in disaffiliation and still being Methodist, that's okay. That should be okay. There's nothing icky about that. It's icky that those other churches would not allow disaffiliation talk, but there's nothing icky about people wanting to leave and choosing to go with a church that looks like it's going to leave. This is America. You got to let people be free, man. Point 2, all people matter and are invited to participate in our ministries. We welcomed all that desired church membership, and we trusted God for the results, whatever they would be. As has always been the case at Wesley Memorial, all people are welcome. I think they're doing this to appease the lefties who are all about inclusion. They're saying, we let everybody in. The letter says all 66 of these individuals were active attenders before August 2023. All continue to attend. 80% of these 66 persons have supported Wesley Memorial financially from January 2022 to the present. We have no idea how they voted with respect to disaffiliation, or if they voted at all. I don't see any reason for them to lie about any of this stuff. You got to be a real cynical person to read that and just go, oh, they're lying. Oh, they're lying. What's their third point? Their third point is consider the vote results of the official vote of the congregation. The official vote, overseen and approved by the conference on August 27, 2023, resulted in the following. 615 voted to disaffiliate, 241 voted to stay in the UMC. The result is 71.84% of our congregation voted to leave the UMC. All people matter to God. But let's suppose the congregational vote without the 66 persons in question, even if every single one of them, here's the key thing right here, even if every single one of them had voted instead to disaffiliate, and there was no reason to believe that that was the case, there was a supermajority even without them. Wesley Memorial still would have attained the supermajority threshold to disaffiliate as outlined in paragraph 2553. So then they do the math for you, so you see that they still would have cleared it with a supermajority of 69.5%. So the prophetic words of Isaiah are appropriate here. Come, let us reason together. The inference being they're not being reasonable when they're making these allegations, trying to put a stink on the church that isn't even substantial because they still would have cleared the threshold. Let's be reasonable here. They're saying our full membership roll was presented to our DS 10 days prior to the vote. Conference staff approved the membership list. And multiple clergy independent of Wesley Memorial oversaw the vote check-in procedures. Several conference clergy and 4 Wesley Memorial laity counted the ballots. Those who voted on our binding and conference-managed congregational vote were full professing members at the time of the vote, per the Book of Discipline regulations. There is no dispute about this fact. We have no idea if they voted in favor or opposition to the disaffiliation. There is no rule. Here's an important thing as well. There's no rule in the Book of Discipline that conditions the validity of a vote based on how long a person has been a member of the church. So even if what they're raising is true, these people came in last minute and they were given membership and they voted. Yeah, you can do that. There's nothing. I don't want to be a hypocrite here. They might say, well, yeah, there's nothing in the Book of Discipline about it, but it's immoral. And they address that. They say, look, they have been a part of our church for a while. They've been actively involved. 80% have given. What do you need to see? What do you need to see to say that these people they're saying everybody counts, everybody matters. Why would these people not matter? What is it? Is the notion that we just brought these people in from nowhere, made them members, they're never showing up again, they're not tied to what we're doing? Is that what we're considering here? Because that is not the case. All people are valid. All people are welcome. All people matter, says the letter. And all standards and criteria of church membership were met. At no time was anyone's membership contingent on voting to disaffiliate. Their voices, votes, and stories are valid. So they're anticipating, they brought in people on the condition that they would vote a certain way. Maybe that's an allegation that some people in the church are making. That would require that's evil. That would be really, if the church really did that, I hope that gets substantiated and proclaimed throughout the connection, because that would be really icky. But they are insisting we never did anything like that. And unless something can be put in writing or a recording, or somebody steps forward and says, the pastor had this conversation with me and said, I want you to join, but I want to make sure you vote the right way. Unless you have something like that showing up, if all you have is a couple disgruntled people who make insinuations that such a thing happened, that's not how you do. That's not how adults do things. It's not hard to find people who make accusations and insinuations. You can find, in a church this big, you're going to find people who are willing to do that. But whether or not they're liars is the question. And just because the people in the first letter chose to believe these people does not mean that they're not liars. It just means if it's a certain narrative that they're a fan of. All right. In the email, here's the letter. In the email in opposition to our disaffiliation contains misrepresentations and accusations grounded in conjecture. Our vote to disaffiliate followed a rigorous process that was reviewed and affirmed by our DS and ratified by our conference trustees. Our discernment process has lasted over 18 months and clearly reflects the will of this congregation. This campaign to oppose that will is concerning and disappointing to the leadership and congregation of our church. We encourage all delegates to make their decision based on facts and in support of the will of the congregations involved. The time has come to bring closure to this season of disaffiliation. Bless each other and move forward in faith. We humbly ask you to vote in favor of the clear, unambiguous, and valid decision of the congregation of Wesley Memorial. So in any situation like this, there are unfortunately going to be winners and losers. There are going to be people who are bitter and bent out of shape, and it's unfortunate. It's just how it is, So what's to be said closing all this out? If you want lawsuits, then, when churches are past a certain size, if you don't let them go, there is going to be a lawsuit. Even if it looks like they're going to lose, would they rather just hand all their money over to the conference or spend some of it on a Hail Mary pass legally? Do you want your conference staff to be tied up in showing up to court, filing legal briefs, consulting lawyers, or would you like them to be spending themselves on building up your conference and making the best appeal to the people around you? You can't have your cake and eat it too. Where do you want your conference energy to be spent? And do you want to be looking at withholding a congregation that had even a majority, even a simple majority, wanted to go? When you're looking at holding them up, you're looking at either creating an albatross church that you then have to support, and if it's not in a good real estate area, that's not even an asset, or you're creating a hostile body that is then going to go to war against you. So it's a lose-lose scenario. If the conference is seriously thinking about voting no on this, this just shows a huge concerning drop in IQ on the part of the clergy. And if laity go along with this, I mean, usually laity votes smarter than the clergy. Funny enough, they don't even have the degrees. But here, if Western North Carolina holds them up, I feel sorry for everybody involved. So I hope that they make sober, good, reasonable decisions. I hope they vote to let all of the churches go who want to go, and then work with what they've got afterwards. And that's for them to determine. My whole thing is just casting a light in a dark place and making sure that everybody's watching. I hope that while everybody's watching, they see good and respectable behavior. So that's how to pray for Western North Carolina, for Bishop Carter, for Wesley Memorial, for everybody else who's a part of that equation. So be in prayer for them leading up to this Saturday, and God's will be done. If you thought that this was decent analysis and you think it'd be good to share, I would love for at least the delegates of Western North Carolina to consider all of these things that I've been able to show. I hope it's helpful in creating a consensus vote. But also, share it, comment. If there are any additional facts that are relevant, I'll do a follow-up post and if you saw anything I said that was wrong, I'll correct it. So I don't want to be a propagandist. I want to put out good information. So I'll put out a public post where I correct anything. But my hope is to be able to continue doing this for churches and conferences that are just kind of swimming through the muck and they don't really know what to trust. So if you think that I've been decent at that, go ahead and promote my stuff. And then if you want to support what I'm doing and help me do more of this, you can go over to plainspoken.locals.com. There will be if you want that address, just stick to the end of the video and you'll see a card with it on there. So appreciate the time you spent with me. I'm going to go get ready for my convening conference. I'll see you later.